is literally when she crosses half court, she can shoot that shit. Yeah. Right now, I have my little...
Natasha Cloud just broke her silence and delivered the most honest take about Caitlin Clark we've heard from any WNBA player. After getting torched by the Fever, Cloud revealed exactly what makes Clark impossible to guard. But that's not even the wildest part. ESPN is pulling some seriously sketchy moves with the stat rankings that'll blow your mind. Do you think Natasha Cloud finally saying what everyone's thinking will change how other players talk about Caitlin Clark?
Gave the US incredible.
Let's break down what just happened, because this is absolutely massive for Caitlin Clark and the entire WNBA landscape. Natasha Cloud, who's been one of the more vocal critics of the Clark hype train, just came out and said something that every basketball fan has been screaming from the rooftops. She finally admitted that Caitlin Clark can literally shoot from anywhere on the court the moment she crosses half court.
She obviously is trying not to talk too much about Caitlin. It's her stream. That's just a 7-second long. That's a 7-second long clip, but like, you've got somebody who was all talk, who was making sure that she was very much...
Now, before we get into the meat of this, let's acknowledge what a big deal this actually is. Cloud isn't some random bench player giving hot takes. She's an elite defender, one of the best perimeter defenders in the WNBA, and someone who's actually had to guard Clark multiple times. When she says something like this, it carries weight. It's not fanboy excitement or media hype. This is coming from someone who's felt the pain firsthand. The exact quote was something along the lines of, "Clarker being able to shoot that stuff." The moment she steps across half court, the way Cloud said it, you could hear the frustration and respect mixed together. It's like watching a boxer finally admit their opponent hits harder than anyone they've ever faced. There's respect there, but also this acknowledgement that what they're dealing with isn't normal. What makes this even more significant is the timing. This came right after another game where Clark absolutely torched opposing defenses. We're talking about someone who's regularly pulling up from 27, 30, even 33 feet out, and making these shots look routine. The three-point line is at 22 feet, and Clark treats it like a suggestion rather than a boundary.
Caitlin Clark in 38 seconds. I don't know what second place is. That's the greatest 38 seconds in WNBA history. A mesmerizing 38 seconds, a 33-footer, a 31-footer, a 27-footer. The WNBA three-point arc is 22 feet. It felt like you were...
Cloud's admission really highlights something that casual fans might not fully grasp. When you have to guard someone at 26 to 30 feet from the basket, it completely breaks down traditional defensive schemes. Most defensive systems are built around the assumption that you can give players some space once they get past a certain distance. With Clark, that assumption gets thrown out the window immediately. The ripple effects of having to guard someone that far out are enormous. It opens up the entire court for her teammates. When defenders have to chase Clark to the logo, it creates massive gaps in the defense. Aaliyah Boston and the other Fever players get so much more room to operate because defenses are stretched beyond their normal comfort zones. This is exactly what happened to Steph Curry in the NBA, and Cloud even made that comparison. The NBA never really solved Curry. They just learned to live with getting hurt by him in different ways. Some teams tried to trap him early. Others tried to switch everything. But there's no perfect answer when someone can score efficiently from distances that break defensive geometry. What's particularly interesting about Cloud's comments is how they contrast with some of the other narratives we've heard about Clark. Throughout her rookie season and into this year, there's been this underlying current of players trying to diminish her impact or suggest that her success is overblown. Cloud just cut through all that nonsense with pure basketball truth.
Cunningham capable of running the point, so you get Clark off the basketball.
Clark faces a trap, lofts a pass, saved by Dontas. Cunningham sets her feet.
The fact that this is coming from a New York Liberty player makes it even more noteworthy. The Liberty are one of the championship contenders. They have elite talent across the board, and they're not intimidated by anyone. When a player from that level of team admits that Clark presents unique challenges, it validates what everyone with eyes has been seeing. But here's where things get really interesting and frustrating. While Cloud is finally giving Clark her due respect on the court, ESPN and other major sports outlets are apparently playing games with the statistical presentations. This is where the story takes a weird turn that's honestly more infuriating than Cloud's comments were refreshing. Looking at the current WNBA statistical leaders, there are some seriously questionable ranking decisions happening. Clark is averaging numbers that should put her near the top of multiple categories. But somehow she's missing from lists where she clearly belongs. It's like watching someone try to rewrite reality in real time. Let's talk about what Clark is actually producing this season. She's averaging over 21 points per game, which should have her in the top scoring conversations. She's leading the league in assists at over 9 per game, which isn't even close. She's lapping the field in that category. She's also among the leaders in three-pointers made, which makes sense given what Cloud just admitted about her range. Yet when you look at ESPN's statistical leaderboards, Clark is mysteriously absent from several categories where she clearly belongs. It's particularly glaring in the assists category, where she's not just competitive, she's dominant. Having the assists leader missing from the assists leaderboard is like having a basketball game without a basketball. The inconsistency is what really gives away the game here. Clark appears on the three-pointers made list, which proves that games played isn't the determining factor for inclusion. If it was purely about minimum games played, she'd be excluded from everything. But she's selectively included and excluded in ways that seem designed to minimize her statistical dominance. This type of manipulation is exactly what fans have been complaining about regarding Clark's treatment by various media outlets and league officials. It's subtle enough that casual observers might not notice, but obvious enough that anyone paying attention can see what's happening. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, small decisions that add up to a larger pattern of minimizing her impact. The timing of these statistical shenanigans makes them even more suspicious. This comes right as Clark is putting up historic numbers and gaining recognition from opponents like Cloud. It's almost like there's a coordinated effort to dampen enthusiasm just as objective basketball people are starting to acknowledge what they're witnessing. What makes Cloud's honesty so refreshing is that it cuts through all this nonsense. She's not looking at manipulated leaderboards or listening to media narratives. She's speaking from the perspective of someone who has to actually try to stop Clark on the basketball court. That perspective is infinitely more valuable than whatever games ESPN wants to play with their rankings. The contrast between Cloud's basketball honesty and the media's statistical games really highlights the disconnect between people who understand basketball and people who are trying to manage narratives. Cloud knows that when Clark starts launching from 30 feet, traditional defensive concepts go out the window. The stat manipulators are apparently more concerned with managing perceptions than accurately representing reality. This situation also highlights how individual honesty can cut through institutional bias. Cloud didn't need to say what she said. She could have given generic answers about team defense and preparation. Instead, she chose to acknowledge something that's obvious to anyone watching, but apparently uncomfortable for some people to admit officially. The fact that this praise is coming after a loss makes it even more credible. It would be easy to dismiss compliments that come after winning or in neutral situations, but when someone admits your strengths right after you've hurt them personally, that carries a different kind of weight. Cloud isn't being diplomatic or politically correct, she's being real about what she experienced. Looking at the broader context, Cloud's comments represent a potential shift in how WNBA players talk about Clark publicly. Throughout her first season and into this year, there's been a lot of coded language and subtle dismissiveness from other players. Cloud's directness might give other players permission to be more honest about what they're seeing. The statistical manipulation stuff, on the other hand, represents the institutional resistance that Clark continues to face. While individual players like Cloud are starting to acknowledge reality, the media and league infrastructure seem determined to minimize her impact through various subtle methods. It's a weird dynamic where the people actually playing against her are more honest than the people covering and organizing the league. This whole situation really encapsulates the Caitlin Clark experience in the WNBA. On one hand, you have basketball truth from people like Cloud who have to deal with her actual abilities on the court. On the other hand, you have administrative and media manipulation designed to manage narratives and perceptions. The range that Cloud specifically mentioned, being able to shoot the moment she crosses half court, is really the key to understanding Clark's impact. It's not just that she makes long shots occasionally. It's that she makes them consistently enough that defenses can't ignore the threat. That changes everything about how teams have to approach defending the Fever. When Cloud talks about this range, she's essentially describing a player who has broken the normal rules of basketball geometry. Traditional defensive spacing is built around the assumption that certain areas of the court are relatively safe. Clark has eliminated those safe spaces, which forces defenses into uncomfortable and unfamiliar positions. The admission from someone of Cloud's caliber also validates what fans have been saying about Clark's impact beyond just statistics. The eye test has always suggested that Clark affects games in ways that don't always show up in box scores. Having an elite defender confirm that her range creates unique problems gives credibility to those observations. What's particularly satisfying about Cloud's honesty is how it contrasts with some of the more dismissive takes we've heard from other players and media figures. While others have been trying to find ways to minimize Clark's impact, Cloud just laid out exactly why she's so difficult to handle. It's refreshing to hear someone just tell the truth about basketball. The ESPN statistical situation, meanwhile, continues a pattern that's been frustrating for Clark supporters all season. It's not that any individual omission is necessarily malicious, but the pattern of small decisions that consistently work against accurately representing her performance starts to look deliberate after a while. The fact that Cloud's teammates and other players around the league are starting to speak more honestly about Clark's abilities suggests that the basketball community is moving past whatever initial resistance there was to acknowledging her impact. The institutional stuff, media rankings, league promotions, awards voting, might take longer to catch up. This divide between basketball reality and institutional representation really highlights one of the ongoing tensions in the WNBA. There's clearly a segment of the basketball community that wants to control narratives and manage perceptions. But eventually, basketball truth tends to win out because the games are played in public. Cloud's specific mention of the range issue also connects to broader conversations about how the game is evolving. Clark isn't just individually talented. She's representative of how basketball skills are developing at the highest levels. Her range isn't an accident or a fluke. It's the result of years of dedicated development and natural ability combining to push the boundaries of what's possible. The defensive adjustments that teams have to make for Clark are similar to what NBA teams went through with players like Curry and Damian Lillard. Traditional defensive concepts have to be reimagined when players can score efficiently from distances that were previously considered low-percentage shots. What makes Cloud's admission particularly valuable is that it comes from direct experience rather than theoretical analysis. She's not speculating about what might happen if Clark attempts certain shots. She's describing what has actually happened when she's tried to defend her. That experiential knowledge carries more weight than any statistical analysis or scouting report. The timing of these comments, coming during Clark's second season, also suggests that whatever initial skepticism existed about her abilities is starting to fade as more players get extended exposure to what she can do. It's one thing to hear about someone's range, it's another thing entirely to experience it firsthand multiple times. Looking ahead, Cloud's honesty might encourage other players to be more direct about what they're seeing from Clark. The WNBA has sometimes struggled with authentic player expression, but moments like this show how powerful it can be when players just tell the truth about basketball. The statistical manipulation issues, unfortunately, probably aren't going anywhere anytime soon. As long as there are people invested in controlling narratives around Clark, there will likely be continued attempts to minimize her statistical dominance through various technical means. But ultimately, Cloud's comments represent something that can't be manipulated or managed away. The honest assessment of an elite basketball player who has first-hand experience with what makes Clark special. That kind of authenticity cuts through all the noise and gets to the heart of what makes basketball compelling in the first place. Natasha Cloud just gave us the most honest take about Caitlin Clark from any WNBA player, while ESPN apparently thinks we're too dumb to notice their stat manipulation games. This is exactly why we need more players speaking basketball truth instead of playing politics. What did you think about Cloud's comments? Drop your thoughts below, smash that like button, and subscribe for more real basketball content.